Here we are in the dark. No need to speak, no need.
Welcome back to the Baltimore Orioles franchise on MLB the Show. I'm your host, long-time listener. Be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and comment below. Just briefly looking down at injuries before we jump into all the offseason action here, or I guess retirements. No super noteworthy ones there at the top of the list. And then as we look down here to these ones, we're going to start seeing some that are interesting, like Miguel Cabrera, who is hanging him up at the age of 40. In the game, he ended up with just 504 home runs for his career, and then 2 hits shy of 3,000. So he already eclipsed the 500 home run mark in the 2021 season in real life. So that's kind of unfortunate that he didn't get both of those plateaus, because I'm sure he will in reality. So bottom line is he's still a first ballot Hall of Famer with those kind of numbers. So that's a big one in terms of names. And then who else? Anybody? Matt Harvey? I'm not really seeing any huge, like, Hall of Fame. Wait, that's not my Pablo Navarro. That's another Pablo Navarro. It's like, wait, what? Rick Porcello, David Price. How many wins did he end up with for his career? 167, not bad. Sergio Romo. Justin Upton. Justin Verlander, 250 wins. So he's done. Good career for him. And Ryan Zimmerman. Pretty good career, I guess. He has not been nearly as good for the last several years, and then hasn't even played in this game for 2 years. So, all right, that's it for retirements. Moving along. Just a quick point of note that they do, in fact, have Miguel Cabrera going into the Hall of Fame. With those numbers, that's no surprise. Very few people hit 500 home runs and have the average over 300, and then the 3,000 hit plateau just too short. He would have come back in real life and gotten those 2 hits, no question, but doesn't matter. Moving on. All right, and now a quick look at the exclusive free agent negotiations that we've got available to us. Now, of these players, the one that if I could pick to re-sign would definitely be Pedro Severino. He's only 30 years old. He's a decent player, and he's been pretty good for us. He hits lefties pretty well, so it's nice that I can use him to give Adley Rutschman the day off in sort of that depth role. But he wants $7 million a year. I'm not paying that for a backup catcher, period. So we're going to go look for somebody that's more like a 70 overall that we can pay $3 or $4 million. So we're going to let him go. Raisel Iglesias is 34 years old, and even though he was pretty good for us last year, we've got some right-handed relief pitchers that are decent enough to take over in that spot, so we're going to let him go. Now, Pat Valaika, we've got a ton of depth at the middle infield positions across our organization, and even though he's been okay for us over the last several seasons, he's never been, like, awesome. Even though, like, when you look at his attributes, he should hit left-handed pitching pretty darn well. He's never really panned out, so we're going to let him go at 31 years old. Corey Dickerson is 34. We have several options to maybe use in his place, and I mean Brandon Marsh. Who was the other? We've Kyle Stowers. We've got Hopkins that can maybe get some time out there. So we've got a lot of options in the outfield that I think it's time to move on from Corey Dickerson. He was really good for us these last couple seasons, and we actually got him at the back half of the 2021 season. So it's kind of sad to see him move on, but he's 34 years old. He's not going to get a whole lot better. In fact, he's probably at the point in his career where he's going to get worse. So we're going to let him go. Jeremy Jeffress is 36, and he was terrible last season anyway. So he gone. And then Castillo was a guy that we just used as a roster filler last year. 36. He's a 61 overall. No reason to bring him back. So of all 6 of these guys, we're going to let him go. Now, there's an outside chance I might try to re-sign Pedro Severino once he actually hits the free agent market, if we see what that's looking like. But that's the plan for the time being, is to maybe just go find somebody that's more like a 70 overall to back up Adley Rutschman. All right, so we have made a interesting decision here in free agency for a couple of reasons. One, we already have Kris Bryant at third base. This trade, or this signing right here, makes it clear that we're moving Kris Bryant, period. So my thought process here is, what we now have is a situation where I can trade Kris Bryant away. Devers becomes our everyday third baseman. He's only 27, which is the same age now as Jake Scheiner. So Scheiner basically becomes my Swiss Army knife. He can play a bunch of different positions. He's pretty good defensively, has good speed, and he's a decent bat. So he's going to play a fair amount, but it's not always going to be at third base. Devers crushes right-handed pitching, hits lefties pretty well, has good plate skills, good durability. He's got a decent glove, a strong arm that's not the most accurate, but defensively he's not a huge liability. And his speed is a little bit less than I would like, but we signed him to a 5-year deal at $75 million. So not breaking the bank there either. What this will allow me to do is package Kris Bryant, and I'm thinking we put him in a bundle with Jameson Taillon, who's 32 years old and in the last year of his contract. So I'm not going to have a lot of room for him after this year anyway, and what that will allow me to do is get Navarro or Weathers into the starting rotation this season. So our rotation gets a little bit weaker in that we lose Taillon, but we still have some pretty good options there at the bottom end of the rotation. Now we get a little thin beyond Weathers and Aiken perhaps, but these guys down here, although they are young, I could plug them in a long relief role if we get injury trouble and we just kind of have to make a move. We're still a little bit thin in the bullpen, hypothetically, but when you look here, we've got a couple of options that maybe could be Major League ready this year, so we'll kind of have to see how that goes. Now, this guy's not going to develop at an A potential, but the bottom line is that trade frees us up to make some decisions. We've done some things to already kind of add some depth on the roster, so I really like this move. We did move on from Ryan Mountcastle, as you can see, so this is going to be an interesting situation there. But I think we just got a lot better. I think he's going to be a much better hitter than Kris Bryant. He's going to add some more pop, put him right in the middle of that lineup every single day, and have a stud on the hot corner. So that's the move for now. We'll follow up later once we'll make a trade with the Kris Bryant package, but we kind of need to wait until other teams sign all of their players to where they can actually trade them away. But right now, we can't do any trades because a lot of guys aren't under contract yet with their respective ball clubs. Got to show you this because this is just kind of sickening. Shohei Ohtani is going to the Dodgers. So he's going across town, but the rich get richer as the Dodgers add another just freaking monster to their roster, not only offensively, but on the bump as well. Although his pitching numbers last year were not that great, but still, 90 overall, just 29 years old. They're going to get several years out of him. They signed him to a 6-year deal, which is interesting, but he's locked up in LA for the near future. All right, so we're now basically at the beginning of preseason. We had to wait till the very freaking last day of the options for teams to re-sign guys to get the guy that I wanted to trade for under contract, which is Erick Pena of the Royals. Now, give me a second, I'll explain what we're up to here. So, Taillon, again, he's in the last year of his contract, and at 32 years old, if I move him, it basically means we're now investing in the future. We've got Rodriguez, Burns, Navarro, and Weathers that we want to get major league innings for, and we're going to be able to do it if Taillon is out of the way. We're still really good in terms of our pitching with Syndergaard and Means at the top. Means was a little bit off last year, but still a very good major league pitcher and consistent at least. Rodriguez needs to get a little bit better at his command, but he was pretty good last year at least. Burns was rock solid all year. Navarro got off to a bad start and then pitched really well down the stretch. So with him and Weathers as the two that I think will be fighting for. Actually, I might even throw Rodriguez into the mix for guys that's we're not sure if they're going to have a spot in the rotation. Burns is going to be there. He was really sharp last year. I think he earned that spot. Now, Weathers, Aiken, I'm not really sure what's going to happen with those guys. Aiken is almost surely going to be a long reliever, and I'm thinking that the other long reliever is either going to be Navarro or Rodriguez, so that we've got a righty and a lefty. And then Weathers I would like to throw in as the number 5 starter, so we'll see how that goes. So that's the plan there. Relief pitching, we're in pretty decent shape. Point of note, we signed Yarlin Garcia, who is a veteran left-hander that gives us another option out of the bullpen should we need one that's major league ready. We still have some guys there as far as closers that we could use in a relief role at the major league level if we want to. We signed some guys for depth at catcher. Now, Diaz, what I like about him is he hits lefties really well. He's not the greatest defensively, but he's not going to be playing all the time, so I don't really care. And it's a 1-year contract, so we're fine on that front. Ryan Mountcastle was sitting there late in the free agency scenario with no offers. So we brought him back with a 1-year deal at $3 million. The reason I'm going to do that is because Peter Welch was not very good at AAA last year. I'm going to give him another year to develop and see how that goes. Second base, we've got these two, Urias and Jones, that I think will be on the Major League roster to start the season. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them, especially Jones, because the starting job at second is going to go to Corey Seager with Bobby Witt playing shortstop. So it'll be interesting to see what we end up doing. Urias I want on the roster so that I have another shortstop available, although Mountcastle can play short, but that's not necessarily ideal. Then Jones is a natural second baseman who can also play outfield, so we have some things that we can do with those guys, and they'll be on the roster. Then Devers and Shiner, I think, are the 2 third basemen that I would like to have on the roster. We're going to get rid of Kris Bryant with this trade that we're about to try and execute here, assuming there's no issues with the budget. Shortstop, we already talked about. In left field, this is why I wanted to get an outfielder, because we're a little thin. Cologne was really good for us last year, not going to lie, but he fizzled at the end of the season, and I don't know that I can count on him having a repeat of what he did last year. If he hits in the 280s with even any power and steals a bunch of bases, he can be my starter against right-handed pitching. So I'm not worried about that. Ricky Gold is just not that good. He's not going to be a major league player anytime soon. In center field, I think Austin Hayes might need to be my everyday guy. We'll see, but that's the plan for now. He's not terrible against left-handed pitching, but I don't have a ton of other options. He's a Gold Glove defender, so having him in the lineup for his bat is not necessarily what we're, completely set on. As good as he is defensively, he's kind of worth at least having on the field. Stowers and Marsh are going to have to play their way into the lineup. In right field, I'm not sure what we're going to do here either. I'm thinking that this Eaterton might be on the roster. I was hoping that he would just be my DH, because he's not a bad hitter. He's got decent plate skills and pretty good attributes. I was thinking about giving that a try, but I don't know that that's going to work out, especially with Mountcastle coming back. De La Rosa isn't that bad. He's kind of like another Jorge Colon, but maybe a little bit better defender. Not quite as good of a base runner, but he's still young, 21 years old. I can let him develop a little bit more. Then Hopkins, I think, will platoon with Colon, and I might try Anthony Santander as the everyday starter in right field. He played really well for me down the stretch last year and in the postseason, so I think that's the move. Now, so you see the two guys that we're packaging to ship off. Erick Pena, they've got a couple of guys ahead of him on the depth chart. And I mean, they're just pretty well set up as far as center fielders go. Plain and simple. He's 20 years old, so he's young. He's a 74 overall already, and what I like about him is that there's nothing that he's really bad at. He's got decent contact, decent power. That part could come along a little bit, but probably will with age. And he developed, you can't see it here, but he did develop a lot last year, especially with his offensive attributes. So that's a positive sign, and if that trend continues, this guy is going to be a stud because he's a very good defender and has good speed, and he's young. So I think he is a good investment for us long term, and that's the guy that we're going to try and make the offer for as our big wheeling and dealing in the off season. This is a blockbuster and one that's kind of like a head scratcher maybe if you're looking at this from the outside, because we're giving up two really good players for one prospect. But I think this is a top 50 prospect, I would imagine. So I think it's one that makes sense for us, and we're going to pull the trigger. And success. All right, so now I just want to jump in quickly and cover spring training results and then some decisions around the roster, depth chart, lineups, etc. In light of kind of how things went in spring training. So Rafael Devers tore the cover off the ball, as did Ryan Mountcastle. So kind of looking like that might be a good decision to have brought him back. Diaz, decent job, just kind of filling in when Rutschman's taking a day off. Austin Wynn's also doing a very good job in the sparing number of opportunities that he got. Terrin Vavra, we gave him a little bit of a look late in the spring, just giving him some at-bats, and he did okay, so that's a good sign. Jake Shiner did very well. Brandon Marsh did pretty well in 21 at-bats, which isn't a ton, but he did perform, so that's a positive sign. De La Rosa was outstanding in 25 at-bats. Santander swung the bat well. So did Corey Seager. The average down a little bit. That's not great for him, but I'm not worried about him. I will 100% take these kind of numbers from Bobby Witt Jr. Hit 304 with 2 home runs across 79 at-bats. So if he does anything even, I would take 100 points off of that OPS and sign up for it right now for the season. So really happy with that. Clay Hopkins did well. Adley Rutschman was okay. Trey Mancini struggled. Ramon Urias struggled. Colon, the OPS is down a little bit, but it's because he has no power. 290 isn't that bad, and an on-base percentage of 338 is a little bit lower than I would like it with the average that high, but still not that bad. We gave Etherton a little bit of a try. He did not hit the ball well, so that experiment failed. We also gave Erick Pena some at-bats late in spring training, which, interestingly enough, I did it because Austin Hayes was not performing well. He's hitting 205. That's not going to get it done. But Pena, I put into the lineup, and the team caught fire. We won like 8 games in a row down the stretch, but obviously he wasn't much of a reason why. So, bottom line, this trio right here, disappointing. Those 3 center fielders, nobody wants that starting job apparently. And then you got Brandon Marsh way up here, who swung the bat well. So maybe we give him a look. At least at some point. But I think the job belongs to Austin Hayes until we get into the season. If it's looking like he's just not going to pan out, then we make a decision. But Peter Welch just sucked. I got him into the rotation or into the lineup late in the spring training, where he was playing first base against left-handed pitching because Mancini is the guy that I'll have there, and he's not great against lefties. So I gave him a chance, and he did not take advantage. And then I don't care about Michael Paez. He's just a depth option anyway. So that's it for position players. Now pitching, we look at the whips. Dane Dunning is a guy that we signed for depth at starting position, or a starting pitcher, so I'm not really worried about him not doing well because he only got 8 innings anyway. Dylan Tate was not that good. So a little bit disappointing there because my one concern this season going into the year is our middle relief, and he could be a big piece of that, and that's not a good sign. Sherman Monahan, not terrible, but not great. Milton Burns, pretty much on par with what he did most of last season, which is not the worst, but it's solid, and he's, a guy that filling in late or, towards the bottom end of the rotation is not that bad. Grayson Rodriguez, the whip is up a little bit, but the ERA is down. That's normal for him, but 8 walks in 14 innings is not what we want to see. John Means, the ERA is way up, but the whip isn't terrible. Not worried about him. Keegan Aiken was pretty solid. Only 11 innings of work, but he did a pretty decent job. Now, this is what I was looking for. Ryan Weathers and Pablo Navarro both pitching very well in the spring, which means they are going to be in the starting rotation on opening day. Yarlin Garcia was pretty good, which is a good sign because he's a lefty that I kind of consider him as our third left-handed relief pitcher option behind Paul Fry and Derek Gorman, and he was really sharp. Only 7 innings, but still, he looked pretty good. Paul Fry, same thing. Not a lot of innings, but did a very good job. Syndergaard was awesome. Travis Lakins was really good. Only 6 2/3, but he's the right-handed reliever that I need to step up and take the role over that Iglesias vacated as the setup man. So we'll see how he does in that. And then Gorman was outstanding, as was Roberto Osuna. Jose Alvarez, a guy that we signed for depth, another left-handed arm, a veteran. I was kind of hoping that I could get him some innings, but I forgot to switch things up. But it didn't matter because the way Garcia pitched, I would have just, said, well, we see what we've got there, so we're fine. Tanner Scott, I have no use for you anymore. You are dead to me because you can't throw strikes, my man. So, going into the regular season, I think this is, I'll have to mess with the rosters. Give me a second. All right, so we have made some decisions as far as who's going down, who's staying up, who's going to be in the starting lineup and the rotation. Here's what it's going to look like as of opening day. Austin Hayes against righties in the American League matchups is going to lead off, play center field. Taillon will bat second. Seager at second base will bat third. Devers backing him up in the cleanup hole at third base, then Mountcastle at first. That trio right there is going to be dangerous, guys. With Hayes and Taillon, if these two guys can get on, we're going to score a lot of runs. And then Mancini's no slouch either against right-handed pitching. Now, I'm not crazy about Santander in right field, but I need him against lefties. So I had to make a decision as far as position players, who we needed on the roster. We'll get into more about who I chose and why in a second. Adley Rutschman's going to catch, play batting 8th, and then Bobby Witt Jr. playing shortstop. Against the National League opponents, we basically just take Mancini out of the lineup. Everybody else moves up. Against lefties, we're not as good as has been the case historically, but Hopkins will lead off and play left field. Shiner is going to bat second, playing second base. I like his bat better than I do Urias or Jones. I'll give up the little bit of speed advantage that Jones would have given us because the defense is actually better as well. So that's what we're going with there. Then Devers bats third, Seager fourth. Not quite as much pop there as we have against righties with those two, but still pretty solid. Mancini will play first base. Forgot to mention Seager is DHing, so that's interesting. Santander will bat 6th, and he can mash against lefties as far as his power attribute, 89. Adley Rutschman bats 7th. He's decent against lefties, so not worried about that. Then Austin Hayes is going to bat 8th. He's not the greatest against left-handed pitching, but we really don't have any great options here. The one thing I could hypothetically consider would be to put Shiner in the outfield and leave Jones in, but I don't think that's a huge advantage over just leaving Hayes in and having his glove in center field. And Bobby Witt Jr. batting 9th, playing shortstop. Against lefties, Shiner comes out. Seager will move to second base. We want to flip these two. And then Bobby Witt Jr. will move from 9th to 2nd. So that's going to be a huge thing to watch against. Well, I mean, we're not going to have this situation very often, so it's not a big deal. But him batting 2nd is not ideal. But on the bench, that'll leave us with Jones, who can play 2nd or outfield, and he's a decent hitter from both, whether it's a righty or lefty out there. Shiner can play the corner infield positions as well as second base, left field, and right field. Diaz is our backup catcher. Mountcastle can play a handful of different positions, but against lefties, he's not very good. Against righties, he's going to be in the starting lineup. Now, Urias is the guy that we're going to need as another option at shortstop, but he plays 2nd, 3rd, and short, and he's pretty good defensively. He hits lefties okay, not that great against righties, and he has decent speed. So I think his flexibility as far as the number of positions he can play will help us. The one thing that we might come to regret is in center field, none of these 3 is going to be on the roster on opening day. Now, Pena has to go through waivers. I'm pretty sure he'll make it because the game a lot of times lets you get away with stuff at the beginning of the season like that. But nonetheless, he's going to start the season in AAA. Brandon Marsh was the one guy that I kind of thought maybe he's the better option to have playing right field against right-handed pitching instead of Santander. That's something that we might try and work in later in the season, especially if we find that we're not using Jahmai Jones very much. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how it goes. Now, as far as the pitching rotation at center guard means Burns, Navarro, and Weathers. Then Rodriguez and Aiken coming out of the bullpen in long relief. I might try and find ways to get Rodriguez some spot starts. If there's a scenario where, like, for example, it's supposed to be Ryan Weathers' turn in the rotation, but there's a team like the Yankees that's got 9 right-handed hitters or whatever, we'll just plug Rodriguez in that day and have Weathers take that spot off in the rotation. So that's the plan there. Gorman is going to move from that setup role to the middle relief role. Paul Fry is solid enough that I feel like he deserves that. Even though I like the fact that Gorman just throws gas, his command is a little bit of an issue and can get him into trouble. So it'll be him and Tate in middle relief, then Lakins and Fry as the setup, Osuna as the closer. Another thing we might consider at some point, if Marsh if none of my stud outfielders in AAA are doing very well, and we're not using Jahmai Jones anyway, what we might do is just call up another middle reliever and have an extra arm available. But with the DH, that's usually not that necessary because we don't usually use more than 3 or 4 pitchers in a game. So that's what things are going to look like on opening day. And again, we went 27 in the spring training, won 9 out of our last 10. So we're playing good baseball coming in. I know the games don't really matter, but they kind of do because they can set the tone for you going into the season. And look at our how they have us ranked over there on the right-hand side of the screen. We've got the second best pitching, the best contact. Our power and defense are right in the middle of the pack, but towards the upper half. And then we've also got really good speed across the whole team. We don't have any guys that are like 50 stolen base, like the best in the game kind of stolen base guys, but we have a bunch of threats to run at any given time. So ranked 7th overall as far as our on the scouting goes, is a pretty good place to start the season. I don't remember where we were last year, but the bottom line is this should be a really good team this year with a chance to hit the trifecta and win 3 straight World Series. But it's a long season, lots can happen, and we'll just have to see how things go with a couple of new faces on the team. I feel like we're just as good this year, if not better, with the one exception being the slight downgrade at starting pitching. But I think we made up for that by upgrading at third base from Bryant to Devers. So, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment below, and we will see y'all next time.